well, you don't have a microphone, but you have a loud voice. So, so first, thank you, and thank you for sharing your company, your view, and you all come from your DNA is different country, Israel, France, and India. And may I ask you to say a few words about number one, the dynamic of the R&D in your own country, and what has been the challenge to become global company as you become? You want to start, Abhishek? Yeah,
Yeah, thanks. My voice is not as loud as yours, right? So,
hello, hello.
yeah. So this is interesting. When we talk of India, we have lots and lots of engineers, right? In terms of number, it's a big volume of engineers. And when we talk about quality of engineers, especially for R&D and kind of doing work like AI, etc., that has not all that has changed with time. In early days, we have a lot of good programmers, but we did not have very good architects or CTO kind of people because in Indian team are not seen those kind of projects, right? But when people from US moved to India suddenly and the companies grew, now we have very good portfolio of people who are very strong technically, building good platforms. But on the AI side, we may still not have that many good people, especially on certain niche areas, right? So there's always a balance. We can get a lot of people, but we may not necessarily get all the skill sets, and that is where we have to diversify.
Yeah, so on our end, we started the company in France back in 2015, and very quickly actually became a distributed company. And the reason why we actually made that move at the time in 2015 was really a question of finding the right talents. We couldn't just find the right talents. We had an original setup which was France and San Francisco. We had people in both sides of the pod already at day one. But really trying to find DevOps in 2015 was a nightmare. We were competing with the other more well-known startups in the ecosystem. In France, it would be Criteo and BlaBlaCar at the time. In the US, of course, we've got all the usual suspects that you can think of. And all those engineers were either not attracted or just too expensive for us. And so we decided to actually open up the gates and recruit people from anywhere. And back in 2015, it was not so common to be able to recruit people from anywhere. So that's how we got started on recruiting people across the world. And fast forward 8 years later, we've got people in 30 plus countries today. Even though, and Eric, that was really your question, so I'm going back to it. But even though our roots are in France, and today approximately 50% of our engineers are in France, but 50% of our engineers are not in France, and they're across the globe in cities. You name them, there's a chance that we get an engineer there. There's 350 employees in the company and 200 different cities where people live. We still have 50% of our engineering resources in France. And why does that make sense if you're considering investing in France or actually building engineering teams in France? I think there's a couple of reasons why it makes sense. The first one would be there's some really good, well-educated engineers, strong in math. Elite students in France are really strong in math and make very good engineers. With, I think, the right mindset as well. They're very much driven towards finding solutions and very pragmatic and also able to think out of the box. I would say maybe a little bit more than US engineers that are maybe a little bit more in general. And this is big generalization. I recognize that, but I think there's a thing around French engineers where they are really trying to think about things out of the box. And I think that's something we value, quite frankly, significantly in US. The last thing I would say at Platform.sh, the last thing I would say is there's also an ecosystem that is actually strong. The people are not very expensive in France, and there's a lot of ways to actually get subsidies for R&D in France. There's a program called CIR, which is a credit, an engineering credit that you can apply even if you're money losing initially. You can get a credit from the state that actually goes against your salary tax. So this is up to 30% of the cost of the salary for your employees. So it's not very expensive. Plus, there's a massive subsidy. So at the end of the day, this is cheap labor for very smart people and well educated. So that's why it's not 100% engineers that are in France for us, but we like to hire more French engineers because they're good and it makes sense economically.
Thank you. Wade, a couple of comments on your side.
No, you do what you can. It's hard to hire engineers in San Francisco. Okay. For our people on Zoom, engineers are a scarce commodity out here. And we scoured the world, and the place that we found that we liked them best was in Tel Aviv. So that's where we are. We also have a big chunk in Eastern Europe as well. So it's not, Tel Aviv is not the cheapest place to fire engineers at all, and it's certainly not the cheapest real estate market. In fact, it's one of the more expensive real estate markets in the country. I think it's a little behind Tokyo now, but ahead of here. And you need to find, I mean, Frederick just said they had 30 time zones. So I don't know how that's, I thought I had time zone problems, but like that is a lot of time zones. So there are some challenges, but you got to find a pool of talent because otherwise it's really hard to recruit one at a time.
And obviously, the unit economics is there, but the key issue, we all know that how you make it work. So what is your secret sauce? How do you make all these people work together? How do you manage them?
Yeah, this is interesting, and COVID has a role to play here as well. So before COVID, we were all used to going to offices, work from office. It's always believed that R&D cannot happen unless we're sitting together, right? But COVID forced that change in culture, and everyone was forced to work sitting there in their home. So that was, from that point of view, we almost grew during COVID. So that was never an issue. The issue was on the other, so work output was never an issue because that's how we grew during COVID. The issue was to build the culture. In my previous companies, I've always focused on building right company culture. That became extremely challenging. Hiring and retaining employees is difficult. Hiring may be easy, retaining is even more difficult, right? So for that, and companies pay any salary, so it's not salary on which you can retain people. You have to retain people with culture and other aspects. That got very difficult for us. In spite of COVID, in spite of being globally distributed, we tried to have various offsites, multiple offsites in India, in UK, in US. Try to increase as much as we can the opportunities for people to meet. Don't do anything, just meet and talk and know each other. And so that is what we have been trying to do to build that culture and to reduce the attrition, and that has been successful. But otherwise, from work perspective, the enough tools, everyone can work from home.
Yeah, I think you said, I would completely agree with you and completely second what you said. I think there's two keywords in my mind that are really fundamental to make a remote culture work. The first one is culture. Making sure that you get a unified culture, even though you have very diverse people from all across the world and different countries, religions, colors. You need to have that common culture and sharing very frequently, more frequently than you would do in a physical space. The values of the company, the what the company stands for, the big vision. I think this is something that as a leader you have to reiterate a lot. So people really get it and get behind it, for one, and for two, communication, especially when you have multiple time zones. I think the oral communication doesn't scale, and it's all about writing everything down and having everything documented, having as much access to everyone on the various resources of the company. So making everything really accessible. Helping the people to know where what sort of process you need to follow. So you have to have playbooks for pretty much everything you're doing, and that's how it scales. All the more as think of people in Australia. They can't ping somebody in the US at any point in time. There's probably 1 or 2 hours of coverage where they can actually ping somebody. So they have to be able to find answers by themselves if there's nobody to ping at a specific time. So that idea of making information flow is really critical, and that's one of the difficult things. It's a big investment in the first place, finding the right tools, finding the time to actually write everything, thinking about how you can actually do things. If you're remote. And this is, I think, the biggest investment to make the company work. When those things are in place, I think this becomes much more easy. But one thing that is not avoidable is you can work for a long time remote, but at some time you need physical meetings. And so for us, remote doesn't mean we don't see each other. We see each other. We actually find ways to gather regularly. This physical presence is also very, very important to build a culture. Nothing replaces the human contact. So it's a mix of having the right communication online plus having regular physical meetings, and it works.
Oh, what he said. I would say travel is a big deal. Naveen, our CEO, he's on the plane to Tel Aviv every other month for sure. And it's a slog. It is a hard flight, and there's jet lag and whatever, but you got to do it. You just have to be there with some frequency. So the other challenge of global companies is you just got to give up on the idea that your meetings are going to be between 9 and 5. That's not going to happen. So, I worked with India for a while. Okay, so now I'm doing meetings at 10 p.m. And then, you can you have a very narrow sliver with Israel around 9 a.m. Okay, so you can do it. And then I've got something going with a company in Japan, and, I have to meet it. Good Lord, I have a meeting with them today, and it's going to be 7 a.m. their time when they do the meeting. I mean, it's just, it's hard, it's worth it, but it's not easy.
Obviously, post-COVID, a lot of companies who have not a culture of DNA of a distribution are trying with that, reacting to the COVID. And your company has been built by that. In your mind, what are the pitfalls? What are the mistakes that some company are going to do, trying to force this distributed culture on something which was not built for that? What are the pitfalls? Maybe whoever wants to start first.
Well, I can start.
Yeah.
I would say what's difficult is hybrid. Everybody's talking about hybrid today, and I think that's the most difficult setup. I think it's easier to either have a company where everybody is in the office, or a company where everybody is remote. Hybrid is tough, and let me explain why. I think what my experience at least is when you have hybrid, you have two class of employees. You have your at the office employees who actually share water cooling and get coffee and get informal meetings, and they know everything's going on in the company. And they have the ones that are actually not at the office, who don't get the information the same way, who are actually waiting for people to bring them on Zoom to actually get information, or on Slack to see what's going on. And the level of information is different. And I think that's really important to be able to level off on all your employees. And I find hybrid particularly challenging. And to me, it's one or the other, but hybrid is really tricky unless you have specific rules, and unless you actually make sure, and it requires a lot of discipline, that every single meeting at the office also comes with a Zoom, and comes with not forgetting the people that are supposed to be in the meeting that are not physically in a room. I think this is where the trick is to me, and that's why to me it's a neither or. Hybrid is really tough, while today everybody only talks about hybrid, and I think it's really challenging.
Thank you. So you think a lot of people are going to fail on the hybrid? Or at least failing is a big word, but at least there will be some damage in productivity or resignation. Yeah. Wade?
Well, I actually know something about this. I majored in cultural anthropology.
Very
And
good. So you have the.
so I do have something to say here, and that is that it's very easy to make a mistake about culture that parents often make about parenting. So parents think that if they just say something to their kid, that the kid will do that. Like, here's a rule. Let's do that. Let's whatever, pick up our toys after we play with them. Companies make this mistake all the time. Every time I go to a company and like they tell me about their mission statement, that's just like a complete eye roll. People don't learn from documents. They don't learn cultures from documents. They learn cultures from seeing actions around them. Who gets hired? Who gets fired? Who gets rewarded? Who gets punished? What gets celebrated? What happens when things go poorly? That's what teaches a culture to people. And to the extent that hybrid is hard or global is hard, it's that, you know, you learn as much at an office from seeing who gets a firm handshake after an event as you do from whatever email goes out later. And if you're not in an office and you don't see that, and you can miss a lot of that. So it's very hard. But the documents are great for some kinds of things, certainly for procedures. But for a culture, you have to build that with actions. And that's very tough.
So the message is that action are important, and you need to find a way to propagate your actions on a global basis. Yeah, good food for thought. Abhishek, on your side.
Yeah, exactly. This is important. So on hybrid, I think what will probably work is that, okay, we have 3 days of work where everyone comes to office and 2 days no one comes to office. That will probably work. And that is what we have done in India. We have 3 days when everyone comes and 2 days when no one comes. So that avoids travel time and all. It's a good balance or good compromise between interests on both sides. One thing which we miss in the virtual environment is pleasantries, right? Normal form. When we have Zoom calls from 6 a.m. to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, and goes on till 5. There are no breaks. And when we start the call, we immediately start the call with the agenda. And this was not the case when we were in real world, because even if we want to start on time, the camera will not work, the projector will not work, internet will not work. So we'll always get those 5-10 minutes to chit chat. That doesn't happen anymore. So one thing we should be doing is to humanize those things. At least have those casual time, have meetings with no agenda. That is something which we do. In fact, meetings with no agenda. That is very, very important. Secondly, let's not miss the birthdays, anniversaries, and everything else, which was so common and that connects employees together when we are working together. So fortunately, there are a lot more tools today which actually starts through which we can gift and actually make it a very celebration for everyone, right? So use those tools and technologies to kind of behave like we are together, even though we are virtually together and really far apart.
No, good. I think humanity, basically. You put the human dimension in Zoom. Frederick knows it. You know, I'm the disaster at the board of platform because I'm always the guy having an echo. I'm not always on time first, but the second aspect, I always an echo on my on my meet, so I know exactly what you mean. So now let's talk about the customer. In my life, I work enough with engineers that the good news with engineers, they always fix a problem, and the problem is how to make sure they fix the customer problem, because sometimes they have a specific opinion of what the customer problem is. So in this distributed organization, different culture, different country, how do you make engineers working on the customer problem by opposition to something else? Who wants to start first?
I can take it because we're discussing it recently. So we are working with utilities. Utilities are customers which no one interacts with as such, right? And our engineers have to build product not knowing the customer mindset. So example is my UX designer gave a very sleek, very good looking design. Looks great. These are but these are very difficult design to use for person on field and demographic of people who are using that, right? So in giving opportunities for engineers to interact with customer is critical. And the way we try to do it is to invite engineers from India for conferences and events to meet these customers at some frequency and to understand the lay of land. So that is what we try to do.
And it's maybe a bit easier for Frederick and Wade because you deal mainly with developers, you know. So you know, I was from HP where we were trained on the kind of a next bench syndrome, you know. So how do you do that? You know, your software developer, because our software developer, they know what they have to do, on how, if it is not the right decision, how you make them work on the real customer problem.
Yeah, I think you wanna get them close to reality all the time. And for us, what remains us keeps us close to reality is the support that we do, the 24/7 support. Every single day, we're getting hundreds of tickets from customers having problems or trying to understand how to do a thing with our product. And there's an escalation chain that goes up to the engineering team, so they know exactly the things from the actual support layer, the things that don't work, the things that we need to improve. There's somebody in charge of actually gathering that content, making sure it's digestible for the engineering team so it fits the roadmap. So there's one way that we do that. We also know that engineers, if they are bothered by questions every other minute, they're not productive. So we're trying to find a fine line between keeping them productive and focus on what they're doing, and at the same time, keeping them close to reality. And reality means, the customers, the customers' experience. And so, what we also do is, we get them on special cases. We get engineers in customers' meetings. We do that regularly on when it actually, is about a specific problem they're working on. We get them in the meetings along with the salespeople and the solutions teams. That actually is very insightful for them. But we're also trying to do that at the right time, because again, trying to find the right balance between keeping them to focus to their code and work, and also keeping them close to reality. That's the trade-off you want to find, and it's always a fine-grained, tough border that you want to navigate on.
Right on your side. Because by definition, your engineers suspect they talk and they see. Sorry to be a bit provocative.
Well, they do, but there's a ratio here that's interesting to point out. So we have something like 70 engineers. We have something like 21 customers. We got 3 engineers a customer, right? And so, we're in an enterprise business. So every week we're talking, we have a standing call with every customer. So the voice of the customer is not muted or filtered. It's like they're on the phone Tuesdays at 10 a.m. So we don't have any doubt about what the customer wants. And in fact, about 2/3 of our engineering resources are dedicated to stuff that customers want, like right now. So, which is another thing that sort of sets us apart. So if you think about that, 3 engineers per customer, so 2 of them are doing exactly what the customer asked for, and then the other one is working on things that the customer doesn't know they need today, but they might tomorrow. So for us, it's much more so than, say, at a consumer company where your customers there are a million of them, and it's hard to, they're all different. Here, we know it's very feasible to talk to them every week, and we know what they want, and we're giving it to them and then some.
Good. We're reaching the end of the session, and I know you're not prepared to this question, and there's some purpose. So I will ask you to use 3 words to describe your competitive advantage. You all are this, company cross-border, leaders in your domain. You're able to tap talent. You build a culture and a management system of distribution. What are the 3 words that come to your mind to describe your competitive advantage? You can think of them.
I know mine. They're on the website.
Good.
It's literally is what you see when you go to the evinced.com. Everybody, it says accessibility at scale, and that's what we do better than anybody else.
Yeah, for us, I would say remove stress, because I think one of the things we do is we help developers actually deploy code on production, and when it breaks, it's extremely stressful, and we help them do that safely. So remove stress. I think more on the internal. I think diversity is I think the second word I would use, on productivity would be the third one.
Abhishek?
Yeah, for us it's end-to-end solution, because most solutions, especially with utilities, because of the complexity of the business use cases, are bits and piece solutions, which make it very difficult for them to adapt. So our solution being an end-to-end makes it much easier for them to use. And that's our big advantage, which none of our competition is trying to catch. Good for us.
No, thank you all. As we are reaching the end of the session, any question from the audience or on the people on Zoom? Could be any question on building company, on the business of this gentleman? Hans, please go ahead.
So I know you're global in thought. I know BGV is very global. The atmosphere today is very different than when it was 3 years ago before COVID. The China rivalry is big. Even BGV used to have a China advisor, and that has changed because of all the global goings on. Nationalism is very big. You know, when we hear our leaders here in the United States talk, it's about America first, it's not global first. And regulations are difficult when you do business. EU has its set of regulations, it fines Facebook big amounts. So was wondering if you could maybe comment a little bit of how the global landscape has changed over the last 3 years or so in your businesses, and what kind of things you have to do now in order to address them that might have been different 3 years ago. So in terms of hiring, in terms of your customer base, do you still have Chinese customers? Do you still look at, when you try to hire folks, do you still go to China and some of these and other spots? So if you can maybe talk a little bit about some of the challenges, specific national challenges you've seen.
It's a great question. Personally, I see nothing good about that trend. Nothing good. There's nothing that I see is good on that part. You know, I think a global world is better. I think it's better for peace. It's better for everything. And it concerns me a lot, and it makes actually our life much more difficult as well. As you said, you know, all the local regulations or just going on the way of business, you know, sometimes it creates opportunities because, you know, you're doing one thing which is specifically good for a country, and then suddenly, you know, this is actually supporting your growth in that specific country. But, you know, generally, I think that's actually just barriers and obstacles that we have to go through. So, you know, I regret that trend. I just like you, I see it a lot. You know, for instance, you know, to be more specific, you know, we can't hire nobody from Russia. We don't hire nobody in China. I would say anymore, because we used to, but now we couldn't keep those people. Of course, you know, the usual suspects, Iran, and but you know, that's been for a long time. But yeah, I think, you know, this is a trend that we're all seeing, and we think is very scary.
I'm thinking about it. I mean, one, Dodge. I wasn't at the company 3 years ago, so I can't totally give you the answer. But I would say this: the nice thing about business, which is not appreciated by people who are not business people, but the nice thing about it is there's a gravity to it. And what I mean is, come what may, and regardless of what people say or talking about on the news, if it makes sense for me to hire somebody in some other country and give them some work and have that work come and be part of a product that gets sold for a profit, if that makes sense, it will happen. Like, it's really hard to stop that. And, you know, Israel, you know, which I think you could easily think of as a super stable democracy, they had some really massive political protests last couple of weeks, and it did affect us in the sense that we had our CTO barely made it to the airport because they blocked the highway, the only highway, by the way. And so, I mean, there's some stuff, but at the end of the day, if it makes sense and it makes the world a better place as measured by profit, then it'll happen. And so it takes a lot to gum that up.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, these are challenging situations, but personally, for us, we haven't seen impact of that. We have mostly had teams in India, in US, and UK. So as a result of that, we have not seen major impact on this, but definitely this is a problem which will concern many, and we have to see how it changes. I mean, we are going back to past probably, which we should not go. Yeah.
Rufus, you have a question here?
Um, I don't, excuse me, my vocal cords are having trouble. And one of you develop a product for vocal cords and you would have your first client. The investment community I come from is very concerned about what we call impact investments and define it in terms generally of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As I listen to your presentations, each one of you do fit, in my judgment, one of those niche categories. And yet, I guess my experience is if you would put that out a little more clearly, you might intrigue some investors out of the investment community I come from instead of sort of having to sit here and intuit it. I also think it would help BGV, but I've argued with them about that. If you had those criteria clear in your information, they could certainly develop it. But it's just a thought. You don't even have to respond to it. Anyway, thank you.
It's great feedback.
Thank you, Rufus, because you were instrumental in pushing us working on our ESG philosophy, which led to ESG and ethical AI. But I know we are done, but just a few words about this trend of all this new generation of engineers or people, let's say 30 or below. I know, discussing with some of you, that you have a new workforce extremely motivated on that. You want to say a few words on that? It becomes a criteria of recruitment now. I believe that more and more, if you cannot articulate how your company are contributing, you're losing talent. I know, Frederick, you're close to this topic.
Absolutely. And I think ESG in general is really critical. And we could see that during our latest fundraise a year ago, that there was actually a lot of interest in the fact that we're trying to serve well our customers, but our number one value is we're trying to also have an impact beyond our customers. And for us, the fight we picked was is carbon footprint, and I hope this was clear in the presentation that we're really trying to make a difference on that on that front. But I think this is something we do for our customers. We do also because we think it's actually this supplément d'âme, or this little something that you can do beyond what you currently do, that actually gets some value and aligns everybody behind as well. I think Eric is very right that our employees are requesting that or are expecting it. I think everybody, really all the stakeholders today, are expecting it, and that's great alignment. I think you can't be a company just for profits today. It's no longer a thing, which is for the better. I think you need to do something more, and this is actually that's good for humanity. That's good for the world. That there's this trend, and thank you for asking that question, because just raising awareness on that topic in an audience like this is already meaningful, and I think that's great. That's where I want to see the world go personally. So thank you.
Yeah. And we have a product which actually measures and tracks carbon, biodiversity, etc. So what we are trying to sell, we should do internally also. And we got encouraged initially by the request from BGV coming to submit the ESG forms and all those things. That started a trigger where we said, as a policy, let's do it internally. So we internalized across all 3 offices we have, across all the employees. We measured in detail all the ESGs and carbon which we are creating, and we have set our own goal to go carbon neutral by 2025. And we have actually started acting on that. So that's something which we are doing. So it's very important. One thing I'd like to have a point here is that a lot of companies are thinking that offset is a mechanism to gain carbon, right? I think offset cannot take us beyond a point. We have to actually reduce the carbon. I mean, you can buy a carbon credit for where someone is saying this forest will not be cut and hence this is a carbon credit. That's not helping planet Earth. The forest has to be grown. Avoidance of carbon is not enough. Additionality of carbon is very important. So that is one direction we are taking from our product point of view, and as well internally also, how we can try to get additionality. I mean, not throwing plastic bottles in beaches in California, but transporting them to Philippines and throwing that there in those oceans doesn't help. You're actually adding more carbon, right? So that's where I say that just showing that we are neutral by this year will not be enough. The actual impact in terms of additionality is what we have to measure. And not much is happening on that direction as far as I think.
Wait, the last few words. I'm sure you have the crisp, you will have a crisp statement.
You know, I sat on the patio with my dad when he was 78. He was a lawyer. He was named partner in a law firm. He was the asbestos king of the Mid-South. And I asked him, well, did you enjoy your work? And he said, what kind of question is that? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I mean, did you enjoy it? It's like, that's not a relevant question. I raised a family. I had a career. I sent you to college. Like, done, job done, right? It was not on his agenda. And I think today it's different, right? And okay, but so it's different. So a company, it's help. Not every company, if you're distributing industrial parts for a plumbing supply, it's a little hard to get the mission going there. I mean, in the same way, but every company has to have something besides money that attracts people to work there. It just, people don't work for money. They don't work for money for long, right? So for us, it's relatively straightforward. I mean, there's a large group of 45 million in the U.S., even more people whose lives are filled with daily frustration, and more than just frustration. If you're trying to order some medicine, you can't check out on an e-commerce site because screen reader stuff doesn't work. It's a real problem. And so that's very tight for us. But for any company, if people are working for you just for money, they're not going to work for you very long.
Yeah, that's true. On this one, I would like to thank you all very much. Taking a couple of hours from your schedule, either traveling or building the culture of the company. Thank you very much for joining us, and I would like to make sure that you thank them all. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.